Hello everyone, welcome back to our Azure Bicep Learning Series. So far we have talked about parameters and how they can make our template flexible and reusable by allowing values to be passed during deployment. Today we'll focus on variables, another powerful tool for making template clean, reusable, and easier to manage. Both parameters and variable help us to avoid hard coding values, but they work in different ways. In this session, we will explore these differences, dive deeper into how variables can simplify our templates. Variables are like containers for values in your Bicep file. Instead of writing the same value multiple times, you can define it once as a variable and use it wherever needed. Variables are like your local values inside the Bicep file that are defined once and used throughout the file. They cannot be passed into templates during deployment, unlike parameters do. Variables allow you to store reusable value that don't need to be customized. So, variables are useful for storing values that are referenced multiple times in the template and for calculating values based on some simple logic expressions. Declaring a variable in Bicep is straightforward. You use the keyword var followed by the variable name and then assign a value to it. Please note that the variable name must be unique as it cannot share the same name with parameters, module, or a resource. Variables are perfect for simplifying repeated values. Let's look at this simple example of the variable location assigning a value east US to it. We also have another simple example where we have the storage account SKU being assigned a value of standard LRS. Now let's look at a little bit of advanced used variables. Variables can also do more than just storing simple values. You can also use bicep function and template expression to generate complex values dynamically, such as resource name or calculated string. Let's look at this example where we have the variable app service app name. Okay, we have its values being concatenated from parameters base name, okay, and the template expression unit string. So we see that the base name is the parameter defined by the user, of course, and the variable app service name combines the parameters and generates a unique resource name using the unique string function. So this way we have a unique name for that variable. Okay. Now let's consider how we may use variables in our templates. Say for instance, we have a particular string repeated a couple of times within a template. Let's just assume we have the storage v2 repeated severally here. Okay, we want to pass variable to act as a placeholder and the value being passed to the placeholder. Let's declare a variable. That variable will be the keyword var. Then we'll pass in a name we want to use. So let's maintain storage account kind. Okay, just give it a name, really. Then we pass the value of that string that is repeated throughout the template. We are assuming this is the case here. Then we will now pass the variable as a placeholder for each of the entering of the string. Okay, so with that we have like a much better template. We are free to apply this really, but I'm more interested in passing dynamic value into variable. For that, let's consider another case. Say for instance we want to improve the naming convention of our template such that it follows the standards recommended for Azure, or look at a storage account or any resource in general. We should be able to tell its purpose simply from its name. That would mean we should know the environment is being deployed to, its workload, and probably any other similar information that will be useful. So what I intend doing here is to pass in a variable storage account name, which will also need the parameters, environment, workload, resource type, and location. Now, what's the environment? Is simply where this resource will be deployed to, which could be dev, UAT, or production, depending on the standard being used within the organization. So we also have the workload, which simply just tells us what service is interacting with the storage account. So the resource type is the abbreviation for the Azure resource. For instance, we have the storage account, we could say ST, we could say SA, or say STOR, depending on what is accepted as the standard within your organization. The location can be then passed in as the location of the deployment. If we have a name that is having, say, for instance, dev Bicep Series SA West US 3. Okay, then we have a better idea that this is a storage account resource used in the development environment, and for the workload Bicep Series, and definitely we also know the location, so it kind of gives you a very good information to work with. For this, I'll be passing the parameters, which I've declared in the upper blocks. We have the workload, and the description, of course. We have the environment, and I've limited this to dev, UAT, production. We have a default value for resource type, okay, which is just the SA here. Then we have the location being fetched from the deployment, and really that is about it. I will be having a parameter file that, so yeah, I have a parameter file that gives us that information, okay, of what we need. The workload is bicep demo, the environment is dev, and the storage SKU is defined as standard LRS. Okay, yeah, this is really what our focus is here. So the remaining ones is being passed from the deployment. The location is passed here, and the resource type is already hard coded here with the default value, which is fine because the resource type here would not change. Okay, so yeah, let's give this a go. Let's give this a go and see what happens. So let's look at what we have on the portal. Okay, we have the resource group Bicep Learning Series, and we can see the new resource here, Dev Bicep Demo SA West US3. So with this name, we know more about this resource. So we have successfully used our variable to further improve our templates. What's the difference between parameters and variables really? They both look like they help us to improve our templates. The difference between parameters and variables in template comes down to how and when they are used. Okay, so parameters are inputs, which means you pass them when deploying the template. But variables are more of like internal values. They are defined and used inside the template. There is no ability to change their values at deployment time. So parameters is focused more of like on flexibility. They let you pass values into template during deployment, making it flexible for different needs. I mean, for instance, we might want to have different values for a parameter for different scenarios. Say in the case of we have different environments. Say you want to deploy a particular SKU into dev environment, but in your UAT and production, you don't want to have the same kind of environment. So you can easily do that and change the value at deployment time. Okay, but variables are set inside the templates file and they cannot be changed at deployment. Okay, whatever you've set there remains the value. They are used for storing reusable or calculated values. Let's look at variables this way. They help with reusability but do not change at deployment time. Why do we use variables? They help us to simplify our code in the sense that we store calculated value or repeated information in one place. It helps us to as well avoid repetition. We write the value once and we use them in multiple places. This helps us to have easily updated template file. We change the variable value once and it updates everywhere within the code. When writing our codes for Bicep template file, we need to check which is more appropriate using a parameter or variables. Now, as a rule of thumb, if we need to change the values at deployment, say we need to have different values for different environments, we consider using parameters. Say for instance, we want to enable a feature based on the environment, okay? And for different environments, we know it could be on or off, okay? So for this case, it is best we have a parameter passing in that value at deployment. Okay, we could have a default value, right, which could as well be overwritten at deployment. For variables, when we have repeated values that are calculated or reused within the template, we consider using variables. And sometimes these values could come from parameters as well. So variables helps us to pass in the values of parameters within our templates defined as a separate value as variables. So we need to understand how this both can help us. So in those kind of scenarios where we need to concatenate different parameters to have a value to be passed in our templates, then it's appropriate to use a variable. Here are some best practices for variables. When declaring a variable name, ensure you are using simple and clear names that tends to explain what the variable is used for. This way, there is no confusion. Avoid writing the same value multiple times within a bicep template. Rather, store it as a variable. Where feasible, use bicep function and template expression to calculate the values of variables.